Hello and welcome to Matchup Plus Plus, the 6 Plus Plus show that shows you how you can match up to the UK tournament meta. I'm Jack. I am once again hosting for you, and I am this time joined by my admech expert, Mr. Jack Doddy. Thank you for joining
Yes,
me today.
good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here because a part of the reason we're making this episode is because almost no one knows anything about admech in 10th edition. But luckily, you are Six Plus Plus's one of Six Plus Plus's resident admech players. So you'll be able to guide us onto the right track.
Uh,
So
yep, we're a rare breed, but I think that's one of our advantages that we have.
okay, let me just swap the old screen. Okay, so admech. Let's talk about the basics. The army rule, which has changed recently. So if you thought you know it, guess what? You don't. Do you want to give a quick breakdown on this one for us, Jack?
Yeah, no, I quite liked the army rule before the change, and it's only gotten better. So basically, the way this works is at the start of every battle round, the admech player decides which of these two abilities is active for the battle round, and we've got Protector Imperative and Conquer Imperative. One of these is much more defensive and based around shooting. The other one's much more aggressive and focused around melee. The other important thing they added in the recent change is that there's also a bonus ability it gives you if you're close to battle line or if you are battle line. So for Protector, everything in your army gets the heavy keyword or its range shooting, and then everything gets +1 to its ballistic skill. So you're suddenly going from an army that was ballistic skill 4+ to their, if you've staged it very well, hitting on 2s. So it's a massive bump. And then if you're close to battle line, if you're within 6 inches, you're also -1 to hit in melee. So you get melee stealth. So it is the stay away from me, I want to shoot you over there part of the rule. And then you've got Conqueror. Conqueror is everything in the army gets the assault keyword, and then +1 to your weapon skill characteristic, and then everything that's battle line or within 6 inches of battle line gets +1 to its AP. So it used to be in the previous version of this rule, you used to stick her in mainly in Conqueror the entire time because it gave you assault and you're doing actions and objectives and everything. So and the name of the game was moving. Now it's actually much more of a choice in the fact that, do I have all my guns just absolutely tear them apart, or do I need to get up in their face? It's a very dynamic and sort of fluid ability, and I think any sort of army would kill for just one of these, let alone being able to choose between the two of them.
That's awesome. Okay, so and then I guess the other thing that is very relevant for admech here that I've got written down is battle line synergies, which, as you mentioned before, a lot of the data sheets, stratagems, abilities throughout the entire codex gets either activated or are stronger when you are in proximity to a battle line unit.
Yeah, it's all of them are about 6 inches within battle line. So in this case, it's the Vanguard and the Rangers. But also nicely with the changes, Call can be your battle line of 6 inches, which is hilarious on that big of a base. And we might get into that a bit later. But yeah, for a lot of it, your imperatives get stronger if you're near battle line, and then not a fair number of your units all have something like that, whether it's Breachers getting rerolls, or Taraxi getting reroll wounds, or Raiders being able to move even further, and Skystalkers moving further. Everything is improved by being close to your troops.
Yeah. So as we're going through and talking about this stuff, it's important to keep in mind, that the doctrine imperatives are going to be affecting things, and that the battle line synergies are that you're going to have a lot of battle line on the board anyway because you want to trigger all of these things. Okay. So the data. So obviously, quick caveat with the data: we are fairly. We have not had much data going into Pariah Nexus, and admech is a fairly low played army as it is, so the data is a little bit skewed here by low numbers. But I thought it was better to bring you this data as it is now rather than data in 4 weeks, because then when the data slate starts approaching and it starts becoming less relevant. So I'd rather bring you data now, and we can talk about that, and we can go over stuff. So in terms of overall performance, again, we are looking at the top 40% of players. The overall run rate is 70%. There's no event wins in there, unfortunately, and the player population is 5%. That breaks down to a 75% win for Skitarii Hunter Cohort and a 63% for Cohort Cybernetica, which are the only two detachments that see play in the top 40% of players. Any thoughts on that one, Jack?
Skitarii Hunter Cohort, not surprising at all. That they were the best pre-change, and they still have all the same tools they had, just with even more powerful units. So I'm not surprised about that at all. Cohort Cybernetica was a bit of a surprise for me, but thinking about it, it does make sense because it's such a skewed detachment. That's the one which buffs specifically your Castellan robots and your dragoons and your Ballistari, your chicken walkers, as we like to call them. So honestly, I can see that going about a 3-0 at an RT or a 4-1 in certain events, because some armies just won't have an answer for that much high toughness, fast moving, angry vehicles. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Sororitas losing that much to Sororitas, yes, that I'm not surprised by that at all. We're not a fan of exorcists or castigators. They hurt. Imperial Knights is a weird one, I will say, and I think that depends on a lot of the matchup. If an Imperial Knight player goes full send in admech, and the admech just doesn't get the dice rolls, they're just going to get rolled. But equally, you know what? It could go very wrong for the Knights player. We have a lot of anti-vehicle, high-damage weaponry. So that is a coin flip.
Yeah. So obviously you're referring to the perform worst against section there. Adeptus Sororitas at 17%, Imperial Knights at 50%, and Astra Militarum at 50%. Because Astra Militarum has such a high win rate overall in this sort of bracket that we look at, 70%, there aren't many factions that it has below, like as a low win rate. The ones that it does have as a low win rate are factions like, there's one game against Space Wolves and they lost it. And, that's not really, I don't really want to take that as irrelevant. I want to take games that have obviously, again, small hit slides, but 4, 5, 6 games. That's kind of what we have to deal with in this kind of situation.
All this with that little pinch of salt. Take it on board, but it does start to show the sort of direction things are going, and I think especially with, as I said, Hunter Cohort staying there strong. And then there's loads that's like we probably just haven't seen all the different types of NIDS list, because I can imagine there's a few in that very deep book that I find terrifying.
Yeah, so we got perform best against being Dark Angels, Grey Knights, and Tyranids. Admech have a 100% win rate against all of those. That's why I've not put a percentage there. But it's sort of like around the 4 or 5 game kind of range. And then there are, I think it's Space Wolves as well. They something like that. I can't remember. It's another Space Marine faction. They have a 100% win rate against. I just didn't write it down there. But mostly power armor they seem to do well against as a general rule. So it's just kind of like the biggest trend that I see in the data for admech there. Does that make sense to you, Jack?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, especially if it's a because I always quite liked elite armies, especially elite infantry, because we have decent high AP damage weaponry, especially and even pre all the changes. Seeing a brick of Custodes walk up and just disappear under breach of fire always was quite entertaining. I think the only exception to that probably is going to be Dark Angels running around. I mean, we have a lot of answers to them, but I think we're in the same boat as a lot of the people. And actually, not Dark Angels, Blood Angels. Blood Angels going full send into us, and if they're playing KG, we have a few new answers to that now with the changes, but still they will rough us up if they're given the chance.
Yeah, as they do to most people. All right, let's move on to the next section then. So most wanted. So these are the units that you are sort of most likely to see, the ones you've got to be thinking about if you're going to an event, and you say you're going to your local RTT and you know that one of the local good players in your meta has got admech. These are the kind of units that you're going to have to know what they do and watch out for. So first one is Iron Strider Ballistari, which is your chicken walkers, as you said before. Yep. What's their deal? Why are people taking them?
They are our shooty chicken walkers. So they have had a big bump up in strength since the changes because they got an extra attack on all their las cannons, and also they benefit from the imperative of going up to ballistic skill 3, and then also having heavy, so they're potentially hitting on twos, 2 shots each for a strength 12, AP 2, damage D6 plus 1 las cannon with sustained hits. And they're in units of 3, so getting 6 shots of those out, potentially on hitting on 2s, is pretty nutty. They also, in Skitarii Hunter cohort, they get stealth, so they're quite tough. They can advance and fall back and still shoot, so they're hard to really tag. And honestly, they're just pretty cheap for what they do. They're about 70 points per, so 210 for a unit of 3 on a pretty fast, tough base. It's a lot of las cannon fire. I see, and the reason I put a lot of these are in every list. I have yet to see many Skitarii lists that don't have Ballistari. In fact, I don't think I've seen any at a tournament that don't have Ballistari now since the change. It's just how many do you take? Do you take 3 units of 2? Do you take 2 units of 2 and 1? I think the least I've seen is a full unit of 3. So they're just a cheap shooting platform that can duck behind cover when it needs to.
Yeah, they also hit that sweet spot of durability being T7 7 wounds, which is, if you have D6 damage shot, you can't kill them in one go. If you have D6 plus 1 damage shot, like a las cannon or something like that, you have to roll like a 6 to get it. Damage 2 is very inefficient to them because they have 7 wounds. So it's just a very awkward number of wounds to have. Whenever you say 7, people are that's the worst number.
Yep, it's just not divisible, and as I said, we just have a lot of them running around. So it's as I sort of said previously, with the idea of like the Cybernetica potentially being very good, is it skews into those weird toughness and wound brackets that people just don't necessarily have the answers for. Yeah. It's like dealing with a weird version of knights, just with more tricks.
I think also you're probably likely to see these in units of 2 more often than 3, just because of the bring it down changes.
I think very much so. I think a lot of people are playing around with that. I think if you're bringing them a unit of 3, we'll get to this later on, but there's a few enhancements that you're essentially always just throwing on them. So yes, I agree. I think my preferred way of running them is 3 units of 2 potentially, but I think a unit of 3 that you're just constantly throwing the abilities on is still not a bad shout, especially if you can protect them. 1 unit of 3 on a lot of these boards is very easy to hide because it's killing the one thing that can see it.
Yeah. Okay, so we mentioned earlier about battle line changes. Synergies. So we've got Skitarii, Vanguards, and Rangers. You're going to see these in every list, I imagine. So is there anything specific they do? Are they just literally there to stand around, get objectives, and buff everyone else, or are they more of a damaging dealing in their own right?
They are a little bit of a damage dealer now, because one of their character units is the Skitarii Marshal, which you can stick in the unit of them, and he gives out full reroll to hit. If you are getting out of a transport with them and the transport shoots, you can have full resource to wound, which, on Vanguard with anti-infantry 4+ guns, 3 shots piece, you could even give them an AP if you're in the right imperative. That could actually pick up some things if you wanted it to. But the real thing about them is you'll see about 5 units, maybe 6, but probably 5, and it's a mixture of the two. Vanguard have if you're within 3 inches of them, they reduce your OC by 1. So a lot of the time you're able, and if you have a lot of spare redundancy there, you throw them on the objective, they reduce your OC and they steal it from you without us having to do anything. That's one of our admech are very good at objective tricks and playing the missions. They're very they just do, that's their whole gimmick in a lot of ways. And Vanguard is sort of the epitome of that. Is they've ran out of a transport but I've got all my Marines on this objective. Yeah, but they're OC nothing now.
Yeah, those OC reducers are they the ones with infiltrate, aren't they?
No. So Vanguard and Rangers don't have infiltrate innately. There is a way that you can give a character an enhancement that gives them infiltrate, but the Vanguard and Rangers don't have it innately. Okay. Rangers are sticky objectives and a scout move.
Hmm.
So I think that's particularly very good, especially nowadays with the new missions, especially if you're going for like those early terraform plays. Having that very quick scout move on your battle line might be potentially very handy. But you tend to see a little bit people lean more into the Vanguard than you do Rangers. Rangers are just a little bit cheaper.
Because the OC reduction, that's the only one in the game that lets you go to OC0, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no
That's all.
minimum in the rule.
Yeah.
It's it's a little bit strange, but God, do I love it.
So it's something to watch out for, even if you're running on there with OC1 troops, that you are going to be down to OC0. And to watch out for. So next time we got Skitarii and Ruststalkers, not something you would have seen before the changes. So it's more of a new addition, I think.
Very much so. You didn't see them at all prior to these changes, and these changes have given them life. As I said, these first few are in every list without fail. And the only debate is how many and what numbers you're taking them in. Some people like the big brick of 10. Some people like them in smaller groups of 3 units of 5. And basically what these are is they are an 8 movement base unit. They get +1 to advance and charge innately. And then if they're near battle line, they get +2 to advance and charge. So they are very fast. In one of the detachments, they can get advance and charge as a strat. And in another detachment, they can get auto advance 6. So they just are speedy. The other thing about reason why people are reading them now is because all their attacks got better. So they got an extra attack, and obviously in certain imperatives, they get an extra weapon skill. And in the right imperative, it's Conqueror, they get +1 to the weapon skill and also an extra AP. So they tear through things. Most people are taking them with the blade weapons. So each of those 5 models or those 10 models in the unit are getting 5 attacks, and they are strength 5, AP 1. With hitting on 3s potentially, and they've got dev wounds, which is the big one there. So there's not a lot that they can't potentially sort of punch up into with what's essentially 20 attacks on the squad. Sorry, not 20 attacks. 25 attacks on a 5-man squad and 50 attacks on a 10-man squad.
Yeah. So
and the reason some people are also taking them in small units of 5 is because the character, sorry, not the character, the sergeant in the squad, he has 5 attacks as well, but he has anti-infantry 3+ and dev wounds.
Okay, so I'm going to continue this solo for a moment. Okay. So another thing to know about Ruststalkers there, that the thing that's going to catch you out is the...
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
It's all right. I was just about to talk about the threat range of the Ruststalkers. That's one of the things people have to keep. It's almost like World Eater-esque. Let me just...
Yeah, they are World Eater-esque. Because threat range, so 8 inches, potentially +2 to advance and charge, so another 8 inches, so that's 16, and then and then a 14 potential. Well, you can only go to a maximum of 12 in the advance. So I've just lost count.
It's more than 32, basically. I think.
Yeah, potentially. You're getting up there in your numbers. Yeah. They are fast. But I was saying each of the sergeants has a dev wound anti-infantry 3+ weapon, so 5 attacks each. So you're taking 3 units of 5 just sort of amplify that. They also all with that weapon have precision, which might not be important in every game, but in the games it is important for, it's terrifying.
Yeah, when you play against Necrons or GSC, you just ruin their day.
Yeah, you just pick up characters like no man's business. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So that's the Ruststalkers. We've got Taraxi, Skystalkers, and Sterilizers. I've mostly seen these as objective monkeys that are striking in and occasionally putting out some flamers / Overwatch threat. Is that the similar way they're being used now? Is it just continuing to use them for that purpose?
For Skystalkers, definitely. I added this to this list because, once again, I haven't seen a list not bring them, and it tends to bring at least 2 or 3 in some combination, some even going to 4. I run a combination of 4 units of them, 2 Skystalkers, 2 Sterilizers. Reason being is Skystalkers have move, shoot, move. So come down, shoot, and then move. So a lot of the times you're sealing an objective that way, or in a lot of cases, if I'm scared of like an Angron or something that's marching up the side of the board, I'm move, shoot, moving after a deep strike and then just placing them to block where he can move and land. So they're just wildly annoying to deal with. Sterilizers are much more of a, yes, they're coming down and doing some nonsense in objectives and actions potentially, but their main thing is that they get to reroll wound rolls against units that are on objectives. Reroll wound rolls are 1 innately, and then reroll all wound rolls if they're near battle line, with flamers potentially getting AP via various strats and also some of the imperatives. So they're very good at picking up whatever you've decided to leave on your backfield objective, or whatever sort of troops that you've got behind anything that's actually tough. So they're just a cheeky, you can't just let me have the backfield, otherwise I will set it on fire.
Fair enough. So we've got flamers for the sterilizers. Skystalkers, what weapon are they armed with?
It's I can't remember what it's actually called, but it's strength 3, no AP innately, I believe.
Right, okay.
So
more of an anti-infantry weapon again.
It's more of an anti-infantry weapon. It's a lot of shots. I think the unit overall added up is like 24 shots. But they're hitting on 4s innately with a strength 3 gun.
Yeah. When people think of unit of infantry with wings that fire and fade, people tend to think of anti-tank weaponry. So I just wanted to double check that one.
No, yeah, then they're not that scary. As I said, I think it's around 20 to 24 shots roughly with the unit at strength 3. So you know what, with all the imperatives and potentially some of the enhancements and strats, yes, they could like pick up a unit of guardsmen or a unit of gene stealer cults off an objective if they really wanted to, or just playing off a wound because you're just fishing for 6s to wound against anything, which, you know what, I have done, because, you know what, if I'm rolling 26 dice, something's going to be a 6 and you just need to roll a 1 and you save.
All right. And then the last one on the list here is Cataphrone Breaches, which I think is the unit most people think of when they think of admech shooting.
Yes.
Do you want to run us down this one?
So this is an interesting one, because this used to be in every list you'd ever see before the changes. They were a bit of a crutch for the army, is the fact that they were just really good in melee. They were tough as nails. They had really strong shooting, and they were super efficient because they had their innate rule of, if they're within 6 inches of battle line, they're rerolling hit rolls, which was just, in an army that with Ballistic Steel 4 was so important. So you'd see people running 3 squads of them, or at the very least, definitely having at least 1 or 2. I often preferred 2. Now, because everything else is sort of lethality has gotten a bump, like Ballistari and everything, because they don't have to rely on the rerolls, they can just have a better ballistic skill because of the imperatives. Some people are sort of leaning away from them a bit, especially because you want a character with them, and once you've added up all that, they're starting to push up towards the 400 points. It's like 380 for the squad of 6 and a character. And a lot of your strats and support doesn't actually benefit them. We'll get to that in a little bit, but they don't have the right keywords for a lot of the strats and the detachments you're bringing usually. So they're a bit weakened by that, but you still will see them around because, as we said, at the end of the day, they are a T7, 3 up, 6 up invuln, 3 wound unit with potentially on the entire squad 6x4, 24 shots, hitting on 3s now with the imperatives, re-rolling all hit rolls, strength 8, AP2, 3 damage.
Lethal hits as well?
Well, you can give them lethal hits. You can do 2 flavors of them. You can give them lethal hits and a 4-up invuln at one point during the game, once per battle, or you can give them a 5-up Feel No Pain. I don't think you see that as much. People prefer the lethal hits. I used to quite like the Feel No Pain, especially when I was worried about like manticores and everything, or anything with damage 3, and then I just sort of giggle as they do nothing to my army. But I think lethality is more the name of the game at the minute, so you will see them with lethal hits. And they also hit well in combat as well, so they have strength 8, AP2, 3 damage attacks in combat. Hitting on 2s, potentially hitting on 3s with the right imperative. So the amount of times I've seen Terminators charge me, not kill anything, and then I pick up 2 back, it's kind of hilarious. The only thing holding them back is now that the rest of the book's lethality's gone up. So like with Rust Stalkers and with the Bastari, as I said, not as many people are just going in for the investment.
Yeah. It's easy to see a unit like that and think that it's not going to be a big combat threat, but it's important to remember they are both. And they are a significant investment of your army.
I think that's the trick of admech, is people will see it and then go, "Oh, there's not really a melee aspect to it. We're essentially a Tau army we've got shooting and movement gimmicks." But in reality, actually, a couple of our units, especially with, as I said, with all the new changes, our melee has been brought back to life. All of our old army rules never used to benefit melee. Our melee didn't get buffs from it. We didn't get protection from melee from a lot of our strats. Like our old version of the army rule gave us armor of contempt against shooting specifically. So when a World Eater player is in my deployment zone and just sort of tearing me apart, it's like, well, this isn't going to help me at all. But now they've balanced it really nicely in terms of we can buff our melee units and our shooting, because actually about at least over a third of our book is based around melee with all the Electro Priests and the Dragoons and the Rust Stalkers. So those finally are getting a little bit more of a chance to actually be, have that lethality.
Okay, awesome. Let's move on to the next thing here. We got a couple of lists of available here. So this is just the one list. Sorry, my bad. It's just the notes on the side. That's my bad. So this is a Skitarii Hunter cohort. I'll just read it out quickly, and then I'll let you break it down, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2 Skitarii Marshals. One has got Cantic Thrallnet, and it has Battle Sphere uplink enhancements. We have a 3rd Skitarii Marshal with no upgrade. And we have a Tech Priest Manipulus, 2 Skitarii Ranger units, 3 Skitarii Vanguard units, 2 Scorpius Dune Riders, 3 Iron Strider Ballistaries, 6 Cataphren Breachers, 3x5 Tyraxic Skystalkers, a unit of 5 Sterilizers, 2x5 Sicarian Infiltrators, and a unit of 10 Rust Stalkers. So this is Skitarii Skitarii Hunter cohort. Gosh,
Yep.
I'm not the first person to make that mistake. I'm sure I won't be.
No, not even close. I made that mistake. The amount of time when we were typing this in, trying to spell a lot of this.
Right. Okay. So, do you want to break this one down for me, Jack? How does this play? Is this like a rush across the board control list? Is this a gunline kind of list? Like, how does this work?
This has a balance of that. So this is going to rush onto objectives and start to mess around with them a lot. So like there's a few gimmicks that sort of help with that. So the reason why a lot of people take Skitarii Hunter cohort is because it gives you access to all of those toolkits that sort of we refer to when we say there's the have-nots and the has armies. In terms of like they have a lone op strat, they have redeploys, they have move, shoot, move abilities. They have all those gimmicks that really help with mission play. So this army has a mixture of Ballistarii and Breachers that are sort of, these are my killing units. If I need to kill something, that's what they are going to do. And then you have a bunch of Skystalkers and Rangers and Vanguard who are going to play around with the objectives and make sure that you never get any primary and we're doing every action we need to. And that's what most admech armies, their goal is, and Skitarii Hunter cohort just sort of exemplifies that. Currently, as of recording, this army is 4-0 at Sheffield GT. So it exactly as we speak, just before it goes into its final game. And I think this is the army you see. So most of the GTs I've seen thus far in the new system have had a couple of admech players, and they've all been Skitarii Hunter cohort. And I don't think the variations you see, you'll be able to tell or really feel as the opponent. It all just looks like, here's a wave of robotic people doing mean things to my objectives. So whether one of them has a few more Ballistarii or a few more Rust Stalkers versus the other one, I don't think you'll feel it as much as, oh no, admech are doing admechy things.
Okay. So as the person playing against admech, then how do you disrupt this list? Where is the linchpin of this? Like, is there a particular unit that the admech is relying on here to get the job done? Is there something that you need to target in particular?
I think there's a couple of things that they're relying on quite heavily, and this list I think in particular has doesn't have a lot of redundancy for its stuff that's really relying on. So like for example, it's got the one unit of Rust Stalkers. Rust Stalkers can be weirdly tough. With a T4 body, 2 wounds, stealth. In this detachment, they always have cover if you're shooting them over 12 inches. But they will go down, especially to a sort of large, lots of small arms fire potentially can start to bring them down quite quickly. And once that goes down, there's not as much things that could sort of like threaten anything behind a wall, because that's sort of what the Rust Stalkers are there for. They're going to rush and gang up on whatever's hiding behind the corner. Same for the Ballistarii. The Ballistarii are their main like high damage platform outside the breaches. They are weirdly tough as well, and they could also fall back and shoot. So they're not easy to tag. And then the breaches. We've already talked about how some people are sort of moving away from breaches and just going for a full army of everything else. As I sort of said in the variation there, some people are just going for more Ballistari redundancy.
We've
But
gone from 18 to 6, so that is
we've gone
definitely a
from
move
18
away.
from 6 in this, yes. But you'll see those breaches potentially sitting in the middle and then overwatching anything that comes around the corner. That's something to bear in mind, is obviously they gain the full rerolls to hit and overwatch as well. Especially with lethal hits, that it's every hit they get is just going straight into you. But those ones, for example, don't have the way to fall back and shoot. So if you manage to tag those, they have a very small number of attacks back to you. So the whole squad of 6 has 2 attacks each, so 12 attacks total. But they're a very large base, so it can be quite difficult to actually get them all in an engagement range to use that. So if you have a small unit of elite stuff, you should probably be a little bit scared about trying to tag them. But if you have a swarm of things, it's like, you know what, even if I lose most of this squad, there's enough to still tag them. That's going to really shut down that shooting. The other thing I think I'd sort of be aware of is that in this, there's a lot of, as I sort of say on the other side, there's pick up a unit and put them back in reserve. So killing an entire unit is vital in this. You can't leave them with like, this unit's got 3 dudes left or 2 dudes left, because they'll use it to pick them up and drop them over for an objective later. You have to finish off whatever you're actually trying to kill, because otherwise it's just going to keep doing those actions.
Yeah.
The way I have struggled when I've played admech in the past is that, yes, I've got some lethality, especially in something like this, but it's limited. It's scary on paper, but for example, if I want to reliably kill a knight, I need the breaches and the Ballistari all going into that one unit just to kill it. So if I'm being full sent against and they're just blocking me up, and I've not covered every gap that you could potentially get at me, if there is a single place where you can run in, I don't potentially have enough shooting power to kill everything that comes through that gap. And once it's in there, I can keep scoring missions. Like, even when I lose a game, I feel like I always end up with about 60, 70 on my loss, just because it's really hard to stop me from doing every action with just how many units I have. But once I lose that lethality, it's me playing around you. So I think that, for me, is where I've struggled a lot with admechs. If you're going into them, I think there is a respect their shooting, respect their melee, but if you can find a gap and go full send into it, you disrupt and you stop it from being their game, their control.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's not how they win the game, right?
Yeah, it's not how they win the game. They win the game through clever mission play and just killing what they need to kill.
All right, awesome. So we'll skip to the next slide here. Tips and tricks. So this is for the Skitarii Hunter Corps. As we said, that's probably the most common detachment you're likely to see. Good old thing, Andy. So the first one is Iron Striders can't use the lone op strat. Go ahead.
Yep. So this kind of ties into the next one as well. So admech is an army where there is so many keywords flying around. And in this detachment in particular, you've got Sindonian, Skitarian, Skitarii, whether you're Skitarii infantry on top of that or not, and a lot of things just sort of fall out of the brackets, and it can be very easy to sort of look at the army and go, oh, they've got this strat. Okay, that's going to be really annoying when dealing with the Iron Striders in particular. Actually, no, the Iron Striders can only benefit from about half the strats in that book. They can't use in that detachment. They can't use the Fear No Pain strat. They can't use the Alone Op strat. And Breaches, for example, can't use any of the strats or enhancements in that detachment. They don't have the Skitarii keyword. There's no way to give them that. There is no weird strats they can do with Breaches in that detachment. One of the reasons why I think also Breaches are falling a little bit out of favor then is everyone's using this detachment. It doesn't do anything for Breaches. So there's no synergy there. I think that's something to bear in mind of I think that we've sort of hinted at this. Admech can be a complicated army. There's not many of us around. It's okay to ask and sort of clarify. Hey, you've mentioned you've got this strat. Is that usable on this unit? There's no harm in like questioning that and not knowing that what all the keywords this army has, or what even each of the units' name is. There's no harm in failing that pop quiz. So I think have that dialogue with your opponents important, because it's very easy for this sort of army that's quite technically sort of difficult with quite a high learning curve to sort of lean back and go, he's just saying words at me, I'm just going to let him do whatever happening. There's no harm in sort of having that dialogue. I think that's very important for an army that's sort of this complicated in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's all lore based, right? With the subcults interacting with each other and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and it was worse in the before the updates as well, because some of the army didn't get the army special rule either. The
Mm.
robots still don't. They have a detachment that gives it them, but like Call didn't get it, and like a few of the other characters didn't. So this has cleaned this up a little bit, but it's still a bit of a complicated one. So just keep in mind that if they've got the weird sort of redeploy strat, there will be loads of like limitations on which units can use it. I'm not saying like anyone's gonna be like deliberately trying to pull a unit that obviously can't use it and put them down, but it's something to bear in mind that if you're playing the game, that actually you don't have to worry about the breaches being picked up and appearing somewhere else. The breaches are always just gonna be foot slogging.
Yeah, it's easy to do, right?
It's very easy to do, yeah.
So speaking of call imperatives, those buffs are decided at the start of every battle round, not at the start of the player's turn.
Yeah.
So kind of like the war, right? So something to keep in mind.
Exactly, and it's the same sort of rule when you're playing against the War. Is that okay? They're calling it at the start of my turn. I need to play my and I went first in the battle round. I need to play my turn, knowing that they're about to do something to me, and that's all their game plan. And it's a little bit easier to sort of see that for admech. It's like, cool, if I've done Protector, I'm going to aim to be going for a lot of shooting, or if I've done Conqueror, I'm aiming for a lot of aggression. One of the things that Skitarii Hunter cohorts kind of helps or counteract that is one of their enhancements that you give it both of them be active on a unit within, I think it's 6 inches or 12 inches, can't remember off the top of my head. But one of your characters can pick a unit and both of them are active, which is why you tend to have the one melee unit amongst all the guns, because it's like, cool, you're always going to have the melee buff on top of you as well. Or same for the Ballistari. It's okay, all my other armies doing the melee stuff, you're always going to have your shooting buff on you though. So they counteract that a little bit. But this is one of those ones where that's information for you as a player going into your turn. You know what they're aiming to do.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to sit in the open if you know they're already in Protector Doctrina.
Yeah, at least force them to move, so they have to get rid of that heavy
Exactly.
buff.
Exactly. And then last one, this is surprisingly tough, can be overwhelmed, and Bar Striders has no fallback and shoot. So tagging is valuable. And I guess similarly, if you stuff like Rust Stalkers being only strength 5 and AP1 base, you're tagging them with a vehicle, right? They can't fall back and charge.
Yeah, they can't. They can't, and they do have dev wounds, so you will lose a few wounds on that vehicle. But as
Yeah.
long as you've sort of done that math, it's not too bad for you. But I'd also say surprisingly tough because, as I said, we sort of mentioned this a few times. But like the chicken walkers are a weird sort of stat line of that T7 with a 5-up invuln on top of that. Back when I first started playing, I played Drukari, and I know from experience that a 5-up invuln in certain circumstances just is as good as a 3-up invuln. You can just farm them sometimes, and pretty much everything in the army has a 5-up invuln at the very least. All the infantry does, all the Rust Stalkers do, all the infiltrators do. And then when you add on to that things like in Skitarii Hunter cohort, all of it's also getting stealth. There's a surprising amount of they're just weathering the storm. I've had like Exocrines and Forge Fiends firing full volleys into a squad of 10 and killing 2, just because you need to have a lot of redundancy to guarantee a kill into admech. Anything that has a 5-up invuln, I would hesitate to just put one thing into it because it's just, the time you do, it's when they're going to roll nothing but 5s.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely felt that burn on more than one occasion, particularly with Iron Striders just refusing to die.
Yeah.
Right, okay. And then we've got a couple of tips and tricks here for the other detachments that you may occasionally see.
Yep.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so Rad Zone's Rad Zone's my personal favorite. I think I'm having to leave it a little bit with all the changes and sort of flee a little bit into the arms of Hunter cohorts. But it's still one of my favorites, especially if I'm like in a teams event because it skews quite hard. So their gimmick is that if you're within range of your deployment zone, I'm constantly doing mortal wounds to you and forcing you to make battle shock tests. So this is an army that really likes MSU, especially like squishy elven MSU. So I've melted a unit of scourges over the course of the game, and I didn't even have to fire a single shot at them. So in those ones, the only real tip and trick against it, unless you're sisters and you're sort of like, cool, everything's getting +1 to hit because you've hurt me a little bit, which is obviously terrifying, or if you're Necrons, you're like, I'm just going to reanimate this. If you're
Or
not
the
those two armies, sorry, Karen?
or the other kind of sisters, we get 3+ against mortals.
Yes, exactly. If you're not one of those armies that can just shrug it off, it's going into it and knowing that, because the first time you do it, it's a choice. You either take more, you're more likely to take mortal wounds, or you are battle shocked for the entire first battle round, and it's less likely to take mortal wounds. So it's going into it and sort of during your deployment, you're planning, cool, I know this is going to be battle shocked, so I can't use that to go grab that objective or start to set up this. I know this is going to be battle shocked, so I shouldn't start to rely on the armor contempt strat and just sitting in the middle and tanking shots. It's You have to be a little bit more thinky. It is one that just sort of adds 10 to 15 minutes to the start of every game, as someone just sits there and has to plan out, okay, this is how I'm going to counteract your army rule. But that is the way you have to sort of do it, because when you do start to get tired and you just go, cool, just everything's battle shocked, that's when you go into your turn and go, wait, what do you mean I can't use strats? Oh yeah. So yeah, that one is just, you have to be a little bit more thinky and sort of respect the rule and just sort of sit down with the admech player and go, cool, I'm not going to battle shock this and I'll take the mortal wounds here. And then after that, it's get out your deployment zone. Cool. Cohort Cybernetica. This is the one we saw with the higher win rate when we were talking about skew. This gives the robots the army rule. So the army rule for the imperatives, the robots don't innately have it. So this detachment gives it to them. This detachment is where you will see 18 chicken walkers, so you'll see 9 of the dragoons and 9 of the ballistari, and maybe 2 units of the Castellan robots. And this is really the only detachment you'll see the Castellan robots in most of the time, because they hit innately on 4s. So they have the old admech problem of, cool, they're just not putting out enough damage for me. They're just not hitting reliably. Whereas now with the imperatives hitting on 3s, that's less of an issue. This also has a stratagem which gives them +1 to advance and charge and +3 inch move to 1 unit of vehicles, which on dragoons that are already advanced and charging and going like 12 inches, they suddenly just get super fast. And it means that your robots can start to stage themselves much earlier than they normally would.
Yeah, because contrary to what a lot of people would think, this isn't just the robot detachment, it's the robot and vehicle detachment.
Yeah.
A lot of these strats enhancements affect vehicles as well as the Castellan robots. So that goes for your Onagadun crawlers, your transports, all that sort of stuff counts as well in there. So they can also be considerably more dangerous in this detachment and stuff. Need something to watch out for.
Yeah, and arguably I've seen people who have ignored the robots entirely and just gone, cool, we're just all in on chickens today, boys. And once again, it's an odd toughness and sort of defensive profile to deal with. And it's one of those lists that just skews really hard. I quite like lists like that. That's just like, I plan to deal with like 1 or 2 vehicles. What do you mean your entire army's them? Like a weird sort of trying to be 3 knights in a trench coat sort of thing.
Right. And then the last one you have there is for Data Song Conclave. That's the detachment that plays around the imperatives, right? That's kind of like their thing, isn't it?
So they don't play around the imperatives. What they do is this buffs specifically tech priests and breaches. It buffs the Cult Mechanicus keyword. And what it is at the start of the game, you decide whether you want to have 1 or 2 buffs. Either all your guns get all your Cult Mechanicus guns get an extra AP if they're within half range, or everything gets +1 strength and attack on the charge. And so, as I say there, it's scarier breaches. So breaches, suddenly their arc rifles go to AP3, which is hilarious. Or your breaches are suddenly strength 9 and 3 attacks each. The one thing I was surprised about is that there isn't a few more people trying this. I reckon part of it is that if there weren't so many melee armies in Ascendancy that have all the same tricks that Datasam do, but on a scarier melee profile, we'd probably see Datasam running around a lot more, because they have all the really like interesting melee strats. So, like, they have a fight first enhancement, they have fight on death stratagems, they have Fiona Pains and Invuns against in combat and shooting. And they also have one of the tech priests reduces your movement and your charge in advance. It's the classic sort of Earthshaker, but instead on a massive basilisk, it's on a guy doing jazz hands and giving you electric shock. So I reckon if we weren't in the current Blood Angel sort of like melee Drukhari and all that sort of ascendancy that sort of has all those tricks but does it on a more scary body, this you'd probably see a little bit more of this, because I think that's their problem, is that we're good melee, but we're not Blood Angels, Dark Angels melee.
Yeah.
So trying to play their game, even though we have all the same tools, doesn't go very well. But if those armies ever come down for whatever reason, I think we start to see Data Sam creeping up there as a sort of weird rogue admech melee army.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the thing with melee, right? When the top dogs of melee come in, they kind of crush everyone else out. It kind of has that effect on the meta, I find.
Exactly. So I'd bear these in mind if, like, in the next Data Slate or anything, we see a sledgehammer hit for Blood Angels and things, and their melee all goes down. But actually, because our melee hasn't been touched for a while, we get points drops, and then suddenly admech melee starts to become a little bit more of a scary concept. Because I like to think of it as like, if we're against Tau, yeah, our melee sort of crushes Tau. Or equally, like, anything else like guard or anything, like, we can just sort of out melee the non melee armies.
Yeah.
So if the actual melee armies go down, then it's all that investment was worth it.
Okay. That is the end of what we had prepared to talk about. Is there any closing remarks you've got there, Jackie, that you want to cover?
I think this I just want to sort of point back to the fact that we are in a small data pool, and I think unlike things like Space Marines, who after a book or after an update, there's been 100 people playing them 100 different ways, and you start to see a lot of that innovation start to happen really quickly and rapidly. We're a smaller data pool, and we've got less people who are doing all this innovation. So I think this could change quite quickly, based on after a few people trying a few tournaments and then somebody trying something and going, actually, this works. It's just going to take a little bit of time for that community to sort of see and do that. We just don't have as many researchers, essentially, or people trying out things. But it will happen slowly, and we will start to see a few more things. Like, if we do start to see cybernetics starting to hit more and more tables, and then maybe actually everyone starts to pull their Castellan robots off the shelves, that could very easily happen. But as I said, our sort of rotation for seeing that innovation just happens at a lot slower rate.
Are you expecting anything wacky to come out of WTC lists, which are not submitted yet, just for posterity's sake? But
I would be very surprised if I see anything but like this, the more classical Skitarii Hunter cohort. If someone does do a Cybernetica list of all chickens, I want to shake that man's hand. Bless his heart, he's doing the hard work for us.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Jake, for coming on and talking all about admech and showing myself and everyone else watching the light. I really appreciate it. So if there is a matchup plus you'd like to see in the future, leave a comment down below and let us know, and we can cover that. And while you're down there, you can hit subscribe, like, and all that sort of stuff. All that sort of stuff that helps us. So once again, one last time, thank you very much, Jack. And until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.